The biggest stars of early Hollywood was none other than this man, largely forgotten today, but really was seen as something of a rival to the other big lover, Rudolph Valentino. We're talking about John Gilbert. Now, John Gilbert to many people will mean nothing, but it's hard to imagine, as I've often said here on the show, how time moves on. To a particular era, he literally could sell out magazines, fill movie theatres, and create absolute riots wherever he appeared, all without saying a single word, because he was king of the romance of the silent era. His story, though, which was relayed back to me by the wonderful actor and friend Mickey Rooney regarding Greta Garbo, was absolutely fascinating, and I wanted to share it with you. Hi, good morning. How are you? Nice to see you today. And as ever, thank you so much for joining me. I do find these stories fascinating about the old Hollywood, because when you think about someone like Greta Garbo, the enigma that they put together, Mickey Rooney told me it was quite simply the fact that Louis B. Mayer, the boss of MGM, actually found Greta Garbo quite dull. She didn't have much of a personality, but she had a wonderful face. So he decided to create this enigma around her, I want to be alone, that sort of thing. It wasn't that at all. He felt that if she didn't speak, people couldn't pick apart the fact that she didn't have much of a personality, but she certainly was box office. Now, one of the biggest couples of that particular first silent era was John Gilbert and Greta Garbo, starring in movies like Flesh and the Devil. Now, way back when talkies decided to come in, one of the problems that they had was trying out the stars to see whose voice actually resonated, whether they were the right pitch or not. Now, what had happened was that John Gilbert had fallen foul of the MGM boss, Louis B. Mayer. He decided, Louis, that, John was a bit of a nuisance and didn't really want him marrying his biggest star of the day, Greta, simply because he didn't think it was good for the image. They never did back then. Plus the fact he'd been married 3 times prior. So on their wedding day, quite literally, Greta Garbo left John Gilbert standing at the altar. That's right. Now, they forgave each other further down the line, because what truly happened then was, as they did a voice test for John Gilbert, apparently he had too much of a squeaky voice, didn't suit the persona of the brand new talkies era. The true story was, according to Mickey Rooney, that, Louis did tamper with some of the, shall we say, technicalities of the recording, and some suggested speeding up the voice, although it was never being proved. Consequently, he was let go, but then he was reinstated, all on the insistence of his former flame, Greta Garbo. She insisted on him being her leading man in one of her biggest box office hits, Queen Christina. Now, what happened then, of course, was, sadly for him, he fell into disarray and his star very quickly faded. We all know too well, after Two-Faced Woman in 1942, Greta Garbo decided to retire from movies, did plan something of a comeback in the late 40s, but it never really surmounted to anything. Her great love, according to a lot of people, was John Gilbert, and sadly for him, he died of a heart attack, and really is largely forgotten in this modern era. But it's strange to think, isn't it, that these two luminaries of the glittering silent screen, and indeed the early talkies, proving, of course, that John Gilbert in Queen Christina did have something of a good, rich voice, a baritone voice. It's all about whether your face fits, whether you cross the moguls of the day, and more importantly, who is more valuable to who in the marketeering of that said studio. It's fascinating, as I say, sometimes to share these stories, because if you look him up, you'll realize that he was a huge, huge star, bigger than anything. Only Rudolph Valentino was bigger, and he departed, obviously, in 1926. John Gilbert and Greta Garbo were the hottest couple of their era. Sadly, only one remains in the public conscious today. Neil Sean in the very heart of London.